I guess we're kind of. You feeling ready? Yeah,
Certainly.
yeah. They're feeling ready. Are you feeling ready? I don't know. Yeah. Okay. All right then. In which case, welcome to the discussion. As you can see, make, play, share, and probably lots of stuff beyond that. If I may start by asking from the far end, away from me. Yes, wake up you. Yeah, I know. I see you. To introduce yourselves and let us know a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. I'm Matthew Hawn, and I run the product team for Last.fm. We're a global music community that takes what you listen to and makes recommendations against that for events and music stuff. We also have a pretty good personalized radio player, hence the name Last.fm.
I'm Robert Kaye from MusicBrainz, and MusicBrainz is essentially Wikipedia for music. So we know lots of information about music. We know which artists exist, what they've released. We know what the barcodes, the track listings. We have tools for identifying these tracks that you might have. And if you have a messy metadata on your music collection and you can't find it and things are inconsistent, invite you to download Picard, our flagship tagging application that helps you automate the process for cleaning up your music collection. And in doing so, we ask you to help us out. If you find mistakes, missing data inside of MusicBrainz, we ask you to help us fix this information. Thanks.
My name is Michela Magas. I'm from an outfit called Stromatolite, which is based in London. We do new ways of searching for music using sound. Very much sort of very similar to some of the other guys in here. Actually, we're quite a gang. And I'm currently scientific director of a European project, which is called MIRIS, and we are actually writing the roadmap for the future of music technology in Europe and see where which directions we can take this field.
I'm Scott Cohen. I have it. No, I'm sorted. I already did my sound check. Uno, dos, tres. Check. I'm Scott Cohen. I founded a company called The Orchard 15 years ago. It was the first digital distribution company of music. We have offices in 25 or 27 countries around the world. Can't remember the exact number. And we supply all the places where people get music, whether it's Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, YouTube, and yeah.
So Olivier from WebDoc. We only have 3 offices in the world. So WebDoc is a Swiss company, and basically it's an expression platform. And the idea is like you have all this content on the web, being like videos, pictures, or audio files. And the idea is like to mix media and to share like rich media posts. So you basically drag and drop whatever you find from the web in a free canvas, and then you can share this through Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from Barcelona. I run a company called BMET, which is a spin-off company of the Music Technology Group in Barcelona. We are a company that specializes in music recommendation and more focused on music identification services for performing right organizations. We listen to radio stations and TV stations from around the world, and we automatically identify the music that's being used. So we report these usages to collecting societies so that they can distribute in a more efficient and transparent way.
I'm Jamillah. I do a weekly radio show for the BBC about the far end of technology and the kind of things that these people do. So, goodness me, where to start? I think I'm going to start you guys off first and jump in, depending on who feels most comfortable, with the idea of research. Obviously, you've all mentioned there's a wealth of data, information, music, tracks, online and off. How do we even begin to start cataloging, finding that information, and bringing it to an audience? Come. Who wants to go?
I'll jump in on a research question. One of the things we do is have a team at Last.fm called MIR team, which is Music and Information Retrieval. So they're mostly PhDs, and those guys come from the research world, or at least overlap quite a bit with the research world. So for us, it's a combination of multiple sources that we use in our research. We use primarily listening data. What people are actually listening to is massively important. But we also combine it with a lot of different types of learning. Machine learning, so using a waveform of music to analyze that to make decisions. We use social media tagging, which is another important method. But all these methods come together to help form our algorithms. And algorithms kind of get a bad name, and I'm kind of curious to see what everyone else wants to talk about algorithms. Everyone says, I don't want robots telling me what I should listen to. And I always try to remind people that it's, an algorithm is basically a recipe, and we all use recipes. It's always a good idea, but it helps you to build up a really great way of finding a lot of stuff in a very big place. And you need to be a pretty good academic to understand some of this stuff, but you then need to apply it to a very commercial space. So I'll stop there because I can go on for a long time about this topic.
So MusicBrainz takes a very different approach to this. I wouldn't even say what we do is research. We're more a lot closer to librarians, actually, which is somewhat a strange thing. But instead of having machines do things, we have people at our disposal. We have lots of people that have helped edit the MusicBrainz database. 273,000 people made edits to the database last year. So our approach is, how do you find out what is out there? Well, you actually provide some valuable tools like the Picard tagging application to end users, and they will use them, and then they get sucked into the project, and they provide information for us. And this information is in the back of a CD. So people will enter the information on the back of the CD, and it turns out the labels don't actually have this information in their databases. Turns out that all the major labels have admitted to me that, hey, thanks for MusicBrainz. It's a great resource for us to find our own data. So our angle on this is to just farm it out to lots of people in the world, and they are a lot more energetic and enthusiastic about this stuff than the labels are in some senses. So they provided us with amazing amounts of data, and our goal is to just make sure that people don't step on each other's toes.
Olivier, did you want to jump in?
Oh, I was just going to also say, as we kind of look at this problem of how do you find stuff and the metadata, which most of us probably think is a sexy, did we determine if it's a word or a phrase?
No, it's not sexy.
That's how geeky we are. But it's also a bigger problem than to say, okay, there were how many albums released over the last, decade in the history of music, how many albums, because now we're in a world where people are creating stuff on the fly, and uploading stuff to YouTube and all these little clips and random stuff, and people, recording at concerts on their iPhones. So the problem or the scope of the problem would be, I don't want to say simple, but manageable if it was just, here's the 100,000 albums that were released last year. We can classify those, that we can do. But it's not that, it's the millions of other pieces of music that are being created continuously, and how we're going to be able to find and search and organize that. That's the bigger problem.
And so, as brought up at the beginning, is that something that can be done with these recipes, these algorithms? I mean, most, I would say, domestic consumers probably wouldn't realize that robots are organizing their music. That's not the bit that people get to see as an end user. So in which case, does that take precedence? Is it better, or is it something that should be combined maybe with social, with taking recommendations and filing from our friends?
I think the technologies are already up to a point where I think are indistinguishable to what you would get as a recommendation from a human. Actually, we encountered the same problem, that is, we also give recommendation services, and we build our own recipe as well. And we find it very hard sometimes to be rated as a recommendation engine. It's such a subjective science, and I think one of the I think the technology is already there. That I challenge anyone to be exposed to two playlists and to decide which one was created by a human and which was created by a machine. I think
like a Turing test for music
yes.
recommendation.
So what we have decided is we are going to cheat our users. So we will tell them that it's human created and not machine created.
I'm not sure I'd agree with that, actually. I think we're not at that stage at all yet. As much as I'm a believer in algorithms, I really strongly believe that it's about human listening. So I actually think that we use the MusicBrainz stuff inside Last.fm. We believe very strongly that it's human beings who enter this stuff in is really what's important. We come at a crowdsourcing approach as well. Our music tagging is based on that. But I'm a huge John Peel fan, the English DJ who passed away a few years ago. If you put what John Peel brings to the world versus what an algorithm would bring, give me John Peel every day, no question. What I would say is what John used to do and what John did now needs a huge amount of computer power to help him, right? If we're going to keep doing this for a lot of people. So John brought a specific point of view to the world, which is why we have DJs, which is why we have humans. I don't think we're going to see human DJs replaced anytime soon, right? Humans add context, they add meaning, they add emotion to things that we need. Machines can help. We want an android world. We want a cyborg world. We don't want a world that's only robots or only humans. They need to be assisted.
I think I would agree with Matt on this one. I think the human input is rather important. If you just have the algorithms, you're not going to do as good of a job if you combine some of the social elements to it, which is one of the reasons I like Last.fm and the other people that combine some machine learning with human algorithms and aggregating what humans are thinking about music. That really rounds it out for me. It makes it a lot more rich. Now, in a lot of these senses, there's still an algorithm that's doing this for you, but if it has some human input, it feels a lot warmer and a lot richer to me. So I think, Alex, I'd like to take that test. I like to identify which ones are human-generated and which ones are machine-generated. Sign me up.
I'd like to add something to this. So the human element is what makes Google Google, and yet Google still has a web crawler which enables you to actually get to it. So I mean, there's a combination of things at play here. And one thing that Google is a good example of is it's a real-time crawler. And something that we have to remember in the music space is that when we generate descriptors, they're not a one-off event.
That's right.
So music evolves over time, and it changes meaning every time a piece of music is used in a different context. The general consciousness that develops around that piece of music has changed. And so if we generate descriptors once and we let them sit there, so several months later, they actually have less meaning. They're less meaningful culturally. And so this idea of tapping into the cultural zeitgeist and this thing that, of course, John Peel had a great talent for, is something that we can improve automatized systems by ensuring that we do this on a regular basis and that research is ongoing in what the meaning of that particular piece of music is in the public consciousness. Then you gather the right sort of data.
I wish we could do that test right now. Honestly, that's what I'm thinking, because I'm right in the middle. I'm going, you're so right. But then I'm like, Alex, you got it too. And it's like, I would love to do this test right now, bring it up on the screen and put two playlists and
Alex
see.
and I are doing it in real time at the moment. We're deploying a system that we're jointly working on. And we have several challenges that we're facing. We're constantly playing ping pong with the expectations of the users. So I'm sure everybody's been up against it.
I think you overestimate the warmth of the human.
Is this why you grew a beard, Alex?
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, it reminds me of while I was at the Music Technology Group, we worked for a project called Vocaloid, which is a singing synthesizer of Yamaha. And I remember I was once in a radio interview with one female, one popular Spanish singer, and she was telling me the same thing about the singing synthesizer, saying that, I mean, that was a toy, that you could never generate emotions such as the ones you would generate with a real human voice. I don't know. I barely doubt it, actually. I don't know. We'll do the test. We'll do the test.
Let me give you an example. I think you can see it happen, and you'll see it happen tonight, right?
I love Jamillah, by the way.
Yeah. No, I'm a huge fan of machine learning. It's massively important to what we do. It's absolutely one of the ingredients in the recipe we have to bring together. But I do think that if you don't get that human response, and when we see, the DJs playing tonight or any of the people playing, they react to the crowd. If this song's not working, it comes off, right? In real time, that's immediate. And I think that we can do that with some machine stuff, can start to do that, right? If people leave, let's do less of this. But and we are evolving them, but I just think that we're always going to have an element of the human stuff, and you need human input into machines to make them work. Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
But you were, was it before the panel, was it you, Matt, that was talking about the paradox of choice?
Yeah.
Do you guys know what the paradox of choice is? It's this paradox, as the title, of choice. Now, what it says is, we as people demand an abundance of choice. You go to a grocery store and you want, particularly in America, even though I live in London, you get these rows and rows of just breakfast cereal, thousands of cereals. So you demand this abundance of choice. But then when faced with choice, you freeze and just do the same old stuff and go, oh, great, look at all these choices of cereal. And you take cornflakes, you know, it's the same thing you've been eating since you were like 6 years old. You take the same thing. And we see it with music, you know. If I turn on Spotify in my house and say, hey, what do you want to hear, to a guest, they just freeze. They don't know what to do. And so we might, you know, this element of the warmth or lack of warmth, depending upon whose side you're on, or, you know, how humans are good at this. I would say maybe humans aren't so good at recommending things, that we just go, you know, I don't know, Led Zeppelin. You know, it's like, wow, that's the most current artist you could think of, you know, the Beatles, you know, and that it's machines that'll actually say, here's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't even know you want, you've never even heard of, and your friends haven't even heard of it, but we can kind of start to seed the process for you. And I think that's the real opportunity here.
And we're trying to cater to people that, you know, I have some friends that if I ask them, so what is your music taste? They'll respond in a radio station call letter signs, you know, K, X, Y, Z, Z, or something like that. I'm like, that's not a music taste. That's a commercial entity that's feeding you garbage, right? You should have your own ideas to what music should be. So, you know, combine the paradox of choice and people that don't really want to go put a lot of energy into actually finding the music that they want to listen to. And that makes our jobs vastly more complicated because, like, how do you spoon feed something to somebody who's not actually willing to eat anything other than cornflakes?
But social, you know, Facebook has this concept called social proof, right? When you see something on a website and you see your friends have also listened or liked or been interested in that, and what that does, we are pretty social creatures, right? And your original question was, can we add social to that mix to help? We found that it isn't the strongest signal. It's a good signal, but it's not again, one of the ingredients in the recipe you're building. It helps to have some feedback, right? Or someone you admire, right? I'm going to try something new because I admire that person's taste. So those are fantastic inputs into a machine learning to say, you know what, there's a million things you could play me. Why don't you play me some things that are based on some inputs that I've given you, right?
Exactly.
So, and what are those inputs? Mood, human, other people, all those. There's a lot of inputs we can put in.
Absolutely. I think there's a very good point there. If you have a jukebox installed somewhere and you give people a whole music library to pick things, you will be transitioning probably from someone who's picked death metal to a ballad, and it will be just painful to listen to, right? So if you actually use a bit of that know-how to direct the next choice, so you give them actually a limited choice that's based on some parameters that are linked to the first record that's been chosen, all of a sudden, so you end up connecting the flow of music through some sort of meaningful sort of lineup, which actually starts resembling something or DJ. Of course, I agree with you completely. You cannot replace a good DJ. You never do that. But you will actually have a different experience from a crowdsourced platform. And this is very much a case in point that some of the systems here are doing. They're giving you select choice that actually directs you. If you are faced with sort of 10 choices, you will examine all of them and say, I have got time to look at 10, and I will pick the best one of those. If you're given an entire library, then you'll end up with something that Scott has been saying, which is that people just pick the lowest common denominator or the first thing that comes into their heads.
Was that still the first question we were answering?
So we'll be here later this evening. And so looking at the creativity, the things we can do, are record labels, I mean, they're quite often presented in the media as the enemy. They're old-fashioned and they don't understand things and they won't release material, and there's this huge battle over copyright and access. Is this still the case, or are there labels that are becoming more progressive? Or, you know, surely there are ways that music can be shared which also benefits the artists who are the creators.
So, well, I have been working since more than 10 years in music industry and into licensing. I was actually working with Scott at the Orchard, and I remember 4 or 5 years ago talking about companies like Deezer or Spotify. The reaction was no, never. I mean, it was a big fight to get deals through, and it was very complicated. And then when we launched WebDoc, which is like basically you can do whatever you want. So it means like, technically speaking, a user could take a picture of an artist and add like a text on top of it that is not necessarily really cool for the artist and share it. So the first reaction, when I started to visit like big labels and smaller labels as well, you always have like, what will be the reaction? And we actually ended up having like a very good, like actually a welcome from pretty much everyone. And they actually let us play, let like the users doing pretty much whatever they want. So I think there is like a real change. And I don't know if it's like, like 4 years ago, it was maybe piracy was the issue. We don't hear this much now. And now like it's driving so much traffic for them that they want to get like actually listeners who's like their customers being a little bit more free and enjoying that. So I think it's getting better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just before I jump in on that, there's most artists, and I would say 99% of artists in the world do not have a piracy problem. They have an obscurity problem. Mm-hmm. They can't be found. Now, there's a 1% who are have a whole lot of money, and those guys are tended to dominate the dialogue that happens, and it dominates the stories at the big record labels. But the indie labels and the smaller labels, those guys are amazing. Those guys are enormously progressive. Daniel Miller, who's on the Sonar, who I'm dying to go see speak tomorrow from Mute Records, is a genius and has been a genius for 40 years. Right, so it's really hard to lump the labels into a bad category, and good and bad labels. Things have shifted a ton.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that. It's that one, the music industry today is far more sophisticated and complex than it's ever been before, and there is no such thing as you can just do it yourself. It's really complex. So whether you call them record companies or something else, you need. The ones that succeed are the ones with these big teams around them. Two is, what I started to see at the record companies is, particularly the larger ones like the majors, you can't lump them in and say they're good or bad, or they know what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing, because it really depends who you're talking to. There's this huge knowledge gap at the record companies, and you start to see in the middle of the companies, these really amazing people that get it, that are switched on, that are, if you look at the major label artists, they're running the coolest campaigns and using the newest technologies and, your experiences with the majors. But oftentimes, if you're dealing with some of the other people there from a different generation, it's kind of like, if you can imagine them sitting around, the conference table on their weekly catch-up about how are we doing on this, on Lady Gaga, and they'll go, okay, at radio we had this many stations playing it, and and they're going, yep, got it. And in their mind they're going, I know, because when I started in the industry I stuffed CDs in envelopes, and then I had my next job was in promotion, going to the to the radio stations and working their way up. But when it gets to the digital campaigns and they're going, yeah, it's really trending on Twitter this week, and we're going to be doing a web doc where we're going to be mashing up some of the content we give with user-generated stuff, they're just like, okay, yeah. And how's press doing? And so it's not that they're good or they're bad or they're needed or not needed. It's that there's a massive knowledge gap at what's happening now. And
I would agree to that. I think they're stratified in a lot of senses, because some of the people that I interact with at the labels are IT people. So they're computer geeks. They speak the language that we speak. They have the same kind of concepts. They believe in the open web. And when they want to do things, they're chomping at the bit to do interesting things. And they find themselves, well, this is a really great idea. We should really do this. This is exciting. Let's talk to the lawyers, right? And that's the no department. Their job is to tell everyone no. So even then, so we've got the lawyers that are still in the business of saying no, and there's still some fat cats, some of the old hats that are kicking around, and the song from Pink Floyd where they're talking about riding the gravy train. Those people, those types of people, are slowly dying out. They're slowly being pushed out because they are looking at the what is trending Twitter? What does that mean? And they're getting eked out. They're getting pushed out. And we're not there yet, but I'm definitely seeing the signs that there are signs of improvement. There are signs of, like, they're wanting to talk to us, and they used to treat us like, oh, you're one of those P2P open source hackers, troublemakers, we don't want to talk to you. But now they're openly inviting us to go talk to them. So the scene is definitely changing, and I think a few more years, and then, I would say, yeah, things have changed. So they're definitely changing as they are now.
And so, I mean, you've mentioned the trending on Twitter. We have social recommendations. We can see which artists are popular on something like Deezer or Spotify or Last.fm. In which case, how should charts be aggregated, and are they still relevant? Because it used to be, Sunday night before going to school the next day, it's probably piracy, let's ignore that, cassette tape recording the charts, the top 100. It's very exciting. But now it's in real time, and that presentation doesn't seem to work anymore. What do charts mean now?
I don't know what charts do you refer to, but I find charts in Last.fm, in Spotify, in everywhere. I think charts are useful, and are useful because people like to see what is the most popular thing. The problem with charts is that they suffer from the mad cow disease thing, which is that the moment you put something on a chart, it will become a chart. You enforce the chart structure or the chart feedback. You're exposing something to a community that will make this be in a chart. But charts are useful, and I think everybody uses them.
We just exploded our charts. I just blew them up. We started off with this notion of a top chart or a trending chart, and we still have them. They're there, but they're the least interesting thing to me right now. We just changed some charts in February. We moved to use our tag situation and our location data. So you can now combine combination of a tag, a very obscure tag. It could be, really, really brutal death metal is one of our tags. And you can look at just Sweden, right? You can say, what is the top artist for? So to me, it's about personalization of charts, right? I'm gonna have some charts. My friends, all of us together would probably have an interesting chart. The people are listening taste together mashed up. And so what you do is you start to apply charts to a community or a small, and I think of them as temporal music communities, and like a hashtag is the same thing. We're using the Music Hack Day hashtag today. I imagine you could have a Music Hack Day chart that would be pretty interesting, right? So those are the charts I'm interested in. I'm less interested in hearing a Sunday night chart in the States. It was a guy named Casey Kasem was the 40-year chart guy, and Top of the Pops in Britain. And I don't know if Barcelona has a chart, but I can tell you what's going on in dubstep in Barcelona right now. There's an ability to create that and see what that's going to be. Or you can see, one of my other favorite genres is horror punk. You can see what the top horror punk artists are. And that becomes interesting to me in a way that I think charts, these little micro communities having their own charts, makes a lot more sense than a global chart at this point.
I think this is a really interesting thing that we acknowledge that charts are culture-based and they are geographically based, and we accept the fact that they all differ in different regions, and they're interesting, for that reason. And that yet when we create descriptors, we tend to do a global approach. So I think it'd be interesting to link the chart.
But we try not to. I think that's really important. I think we try to do exactly, specifically internationally. And I'm a huge, despite the accent, I'm a huge proponent of international scenes and an international. If we all have the American charts, we're all going to be really bored really fast, right? And ultimately, what's great about tags as opposed to genres for us, and we choose to do, some of our tags are absolutely genres, but it's much more interesting if you call music one thing and I call it something else, that's fine. And if, my favorite tag in the world in the US, world music, what does that mean? It means not
well,
US is what it means.
No, it means someone in the marketing department didn't know where the hell
exactly.
to put it.
Yeah, exactly. So as opposed to letting people create their own, and then I think what you end up with is a really sense of let's figure out how we want to describe music in human terms.
But I'd love to have a description from particular subgroups and compare that description to another subgroup from somewhere completely different. I think that is actually very relevant, because this is where our tagging starts becoming really culturally relevant, really culturally conscious.
But I do think there's a place for charts. I mean, it's shared experiences. I mean, that's the idea. It's not everyone. It's kind of both. You want things that are personalized to you. It's kind of how the internet works. There's stuff that's highly personalized. So when I go online, I check my bank account with my password, my stuff. But then I want also the ability to look at everything in the world. And, you know, I don't know, I want those kind of double rainbow experiences where everyone saw that same YouTube video. You guys saw Double Rainbow, right?
What does it mean?
What does it mean, right? Like, that's because, you know, the kind of chart notion. We like these shared experiences. Did you hear this song? Yes, we all heard the same song. We all saw the same viral video. And then move on.
And so looking at different cultures in different parts of different countries, is geographical tagging important to sound, as it were? Maybe not something that would occur immediately to someone who's writing a song, but when it comes to categorization, it seems to be quite important. And then maybe we can start to learn different tags, because I'm not entirely sure how people tag their music in Guatemala or how people tag their music in Korea. Maybe it's something that I should learn, or should I find an easier way to find that? It seems like we're looking at how to deal with fragmentation here in many cases.
So we have that happening inside of MusicBrainz, where the Canadian government, in particular in Montreal, they've approached us and said, we'd like to have a project where we can highlight music from Quebec. And so that really begs the question, what music is there from Quebec, right? So they're really asking us to allow our users and Canadian users to tag the music with a geographic identifier so that they can then go and say, we're promoting this, which in some sense is kind of sad because we should be promoting everything and it shouldn't necessarily be sort of along nationalistic boundaries, but I can see wanting to highlight your own music in a sense. So there's a desire for that, and if there's a desire for that, I suspect there's other uses. So we're going to be doing stuff like that, and then, you know, maybe Last FM will take advantage of that as well.
But I think that's pretty cool. So did you already start the project, though?
No, that will probably
Arcade
happen
Fire.
in October.
There's some really good bands. I think
Oh,
people will
absolutely.
be surprised when they realize the diversity. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that tagging a region that you'd never think there's something out of Quebec that makes it, you might actually go, oh, actually, this might be a place to drill down deeper by geotagging music. I think it's a
Canada makes
clever
sense.
idea.
They have a fantastic indie music scene in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, CBC Radio 3 was pioneering all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I was doing a really great job back in 2004-05. It came out with an online mag that was probably one of the top designs in the world, and was just doing a really, really good job at promoting. You know, I've heard of lots of stuff that I would never have heard of otherwise, but I think this stretches a lot further. I mean, we're talking about, someone mentioned Uruguay or something like that. I mean, basically, look at the entire continent of South America and just the amount of music, fantastic music that there is. You try and give me, you know, how many artists can you name? And, you know, all of us would be a lot more into it if we could dive into it, if we had help in diving into this music. If we could go into it by not having to spell artist names or knowing exactly what genre it belongs to or where exactly to find it. And I think some of the systems that this community is developing here is going a long way towards enabling that. And once that entire world opens, music choice can become a great deal freer and less linked to sort of Western marketing machinery. I think this is going to be a big change.
It's already happening, though.
Yeah,
We had a huge explosion in the last 2 years of Russian and Brazilians into Last FM, which just shifted things, right? So if you now look at, the Brazilians came in really hard and fast, and they're big Paul McCartney fans. But there's now, if you go listen to Paul McCartney radio, you will now see a really Brazilian stream starting to flow through our radio if you use that now, because we're pulling stuff in, and it's like, that's what's happening. People who listen to Paul McCartney listen to a lot of Brazilian music. So I think you're going to start to see this stuff happen without it. It's just going to, you can't stop it.
I don't think I want to take one of the Paul McCartney songs and try and do a samba version. It's just really bizarre.
At BMAT, we have two main services, which one is music recommendation and the other one is music identification. And funnily enough, we have started to fit music recommendation with data from music identification. And this is another way to use geotagging information, not geotag as the country of origin or the area of origin of the band, but the country of being broadcasted, of where it's being broadcasted. And actually, when you start thinking about it, we have so many possibilities to use this data. We have started using this to sort of be able to provide music recommendation for the West Coast versus the East Coast, or also some genre-specific radio stations allows us to create specific genre recommendations like jazz or like classical music, and absolutely this is something that makes all the sense.
You know, I think we're in a phase right now. I think we're in a phase right now where it's about joining up things that kind of exist fragmented. So it's taking Songkick, which has all the concerts, with geolocation of where you are, with social, which is what are the things you already like and your friends like, with identification and recommendation, and now somebody kind of putting it all together, because all of these things already exist, and so now it's just kind of drawing them up, and you're starting to see some of it happening, and I don't think most people are even noticing it. Like if you're watching YouTube videos now, they're geolocated and connected to Songkick, so you could watch a video that's from a band from, you know, a 3 or 4 year old video, but all of a sudden, right there on the site says, actually, they're playing in this town tonight or next week with a link to ticket purchase. So it's kind of happening now. It's maybe as we're moving into the Web 3.0 world where the technology really starts to work for us instead of us having to go work for it.
And so if we can find out where music is made and we can find out where music is being played, how can we get music to find us with mobile? I mean, it seems a difficult problem still. There's a lot of technical issues, there's a lot of streaming issues, and, you know, if you live in any place with an underground, you're not going to hear it anyway. But are there developments in mobile that you see as improvements or areas that need a lot more work?
So this is beyond ringtones, you mean? Because I thought that's where mobile was all at. You know, Crazy Frog. And
I think I have a cheater answer to this. I'm really happy with the Last.fm app on my mobile, and when I'm riding my bike and I don't particularly want to pick something and, you know, think about it a lot, just put on the Last.fm client. Next time I'll have to try the Paul McCartney Seed. We'll see how that goes. That might be interesting to ride my bike to.
I would say that for us, the mobile platforms are really key. That's where the growth is going to be, right? We actually, I'm convinced that's where it's going to be. I'm not convinced that we're there technology-wise, the way that a lot of other folks are. I mean, the data plans are too expensive. Your underground example is great. I think Spotify has done a great job of caching a set. Let me take a list with us. We have an app on Spotify. Last.fm makes recommendations within Spotify using the Last.fm app. And we have one button, right? You drag a song onto the Last.fm app, and we'll make you a playlist of 20 songs to take with you. So caching is the way to do that, but it's still about offline playback, right? I mean, this whole notion of streaming versus download, I think, doesn't matter anymore. And for a while, it was really important, but I think it's changed a lot, right? And as we expect, and most of the Scrabble data, which is the listening data that Last.fm collects from its users, comes from people's local libraries, right? So about 80 to 90% of the data coming in is still, we're all talking about streaming like it's the next big thing. It's not there yet. Right? It's really important. We have a radio station that streams. We've had it for a long time. But most people's experiences are that music file they've got. So what we're trying to do is try to figure out how to playlist your own collection, right? How do you actually create a playlist that press a button and find me some great stuff that I hadn't thought about? Give me one song, and I'll find 7 other songs that make sense that you can then pull in into your own library. So that's the direction we're going to go in for mobile. Playlisting your local collections or playlisting your cloud.
Because I think these are all really connected, you know, as issues. You know, what you said about streaming's not here, I think streaming versus downloading, or we'll even call it caching, kind of intermediary step, it's kind of irrelevant because if we get into good recommendation, good identification, understanding who the user is, you can overcome things like bandwidth and charges and streaming or offline play, because if I have all this information about who you are as a person and what's happening in the world, I can actually just push stuff onto your phone and onto your mobile device. So you didn't even have to ask it, because I predict that this is what you're going to want to search for next. And this is where the machine learning gets really good, that you can probably figure out 70, 80, 90% of what that person might listen to next when you get good at it. so that it's already on the local device. You deliver it up to them in those low bandwidth moments that's pushed down to the device. And so when you go, actually I do want to listen, all my friends are listening to that new Lady Gaga track, and you're in the underground, you're in the subway or the tube, and all of a sudden you can listen to it, and you're not even online because it already put it there for you.
Mm-hmm. But I will step in with the voice of Michael Breidenbrucker, who was unfortunately prevented from being with us today. And he's the author of RJ DJ, but also of the Inception, the app, which was created to work with the movie, but it created a sonar landscape that sort of responded to the concept of the movie. And what's particular about it, I think we can take a clue from this app. It generates sound depending on where you are, what's around you, what sort of the weather is. It actually looks at all the services that a mobile platform can give you, all the information it can collect, and we all have that on our PDAs, and actually generates a sound landscape around it, so that there's one particular part of this app that will only work if you go to Africa, for instance. You have to be on an African network, and there have been people who have taken the ferry across from Tarifa to Tangier just for that purpose, apparently. But anyway, so I think this is something that we need to take a clue from if we are examining what a mobile can do for us. It's not just the technical aspects of pushing something onto it, but as a very, very simple thing we should remember is that it collects a tremendous amount of data of where it is, of what the environment is around it, that can influence you to push recommendations to it, but also it enables a very, very simple transfer of a metadata communication from the mobile, from the list that's being played at the moment, or from whatever the user is into at that moment in time, so whatever mood they're in, to your service, and providing that you can perform a search based on any of our systems here, you can generate a very meaningful playlist for that moment, for that geolocation, for that person. So actually, that device will help you a tremendous amount in catering, in gathering precise knowledge about the individual.
Okay, I am going to open up for some questions here in a moment, so have a think. But I'm going to have probably the hardest question for the panel, because it's usually the creative one. If you could visualize something and have it today, involving music and data and your own life, maybe there's something that you think, God, I wish this worked, and I don't have it yet. I mean, I'd like to chase people around with a parrot copter, annoying them with my favorite pop songs. There are many things that you could just jump off the deep end and try. What's missing? What would you ideally like to see? Now, I don't know who wants to go first, because it's not an easy one.
I'll try this one. Well, I think the good news is, we were speaking about this a little bit before the panel, is like a lot of things we were thinking about 10 years ago or 5 years ago were technically impossible. Right now, we talk a lot about HTML5, it's becoming, I won't say easy to code and to build a product, but you can actually get somewhere that was impossible before. So for instance, WebDoc, one of the inspiration was Minority Report, the movie, where you were seeing the guy drag and dropping media on a window. To do this 4 years ago was impossible. And now it's you do it like this. So I feel that the next thing, and one of the things I'm passionate about, is actually the disruption of the play button, which is that right now, a play button looks like a play button on your CD player 20, 15 years ago. So one of the things we are working on is how can I add a context to a play button? So I'm gonna say okay, this was my vacation in Barcelona. Here is a few pictures of my trip, and here is the songs I was listening to, and you shoot it. So I think it's expressing yourself with media, but you mix everything together. And if you look at the web right now, you have a YouTube for video, SoundCloud for audio, Flickr or Instagram, and it's all verticals, but they can't talk together. And this is where I'm really excited. It's right now you can get those media talking together. So then it's about coding a little bit more fast.
For me, oh, go ahead, Alex.
No, maybe your wish list is probably similar to mine, so.
Wouldn't be surprised by that. The original impetus that I had, there was a point after the dot-com boom went bust, that I was examining what I should do with my life. And one of the fundamental things that I wanted to do was stop picking this track to listen to, and this track, making playlists. I wanted automated things. So the thing that I really wanted the most was something where I could say, oh, I really had a terrible day at work. I am just pissed off. Start with Metallica, end and Enya, 2 hours, go. That's all I want to say, right? So the system should take me from something really angry, which matches my mood right now, and I would like it to actually guide me through this path to calm down and put me to sleep with Enya so I can actually just go to sleep and stop being angry.
So gonna make that?
I love that, right?
Zen and the art of playlist generation.
And I'm now, the realization then sunk in. It's like, I can't do this until I have this giant database of information. Once I have a giant database of information, this is going to be fun to code. I'm really looking forward to this, right? So now I'm sitting on this giant database of information, and it takes all of my available time, and I don't have time to actually code this thing. So at some point, I think I need to take a sabbatical and maybe come to London and sit at the Last FM offices and see if we can come up with something like this.
Yeah, I'm with the giant database thing as well.
This is what your dream is.
Yes, my dream is a unified, universal database of good metadata for all musical assets, which is actually something very challenging. Actually, there's, just to give you an idea, there is no database available that matches ISRC with ISWC. ISRC is the recording phonogram identifier, and ISWC is the composer identifier. There's no database that connects. There is no database that can tell you which phonogram belongs to which composition. To start with, that would be the first thing that I would ask.
You've got a list.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sort of particularly keen to see things move into tangible space. So into tangible interfaces and into real space, into event space, and some of the data that we're generating that ends up driving more events, more communal, physical interaction between people. Because at the moment, we've sort of, the vast majority of what we do is effective individual choices. And I think it actually has the potential to affect group behaviors, and I'd like to see more of that. So whether it's through developing systems like binaural audio to map audio in space, and you turn people into playlists, and then they can sort of physically recommend each other, and you can actually tag people off then and say, I don't want to speak to anyone who kind of listens to this kind of crap. So, so then you might be in the same room, but you're ignoring them like totally because they're not on your map. They're not actually being mapped out to you in the sound space. I mean, that sort of thing. That's like experiential. I want to turn it into something experiential, which I think it would be really, really valuable. It'd be very exciting, I think, when we get into that area.
I don't know if it's a wish list, and I think these wish lists are kind of big. It's like, but kind of even picking up on what Robert was saying. It's already happened in the more, I don't know, in the offline world in terms of music and mood. So whether it's a restaurant or a retail space, saying based on the type of music we play, we can elicit certain behaviors from you. If we want you to eat in a restaurant and we want to turn tables faster, we know that if we play, music that's, 120 beats a minute, you're just shoveling it in, right? Or, but if it's a retail space where they want you to really go through the racks and look at all the clothes, and, they'll play different music based on certain demographic information. And then if you look at it, the same issue from another side, we know that when we look at, brain chemistry, that when we listen to certain music, it literally changes our brain. You can put somebody in a CAT scan and then play certain music, and it changes the way you think. And so in a larger world, in this scary kind of Big Brother world, that we live in. It now says to, let's say, an advertiser, this person will be more receptive to my product if I now place this in front of them the moment they feel a little melancholy or sad, or they're feeling really happy. Let's sell them Coke, you know? Not that kind of Coke. Yeah, the enjoyment kind, you know, out of a can. So nobody actually knew which kind I meant. So I think, I don't know where I'm going with my wish list, but then going to what Robert was saying, this idea of, can we now understand what, we know that music can change what your brain waves and your brain chemistry. If we know your brain chemistry, can we now create, rather than you have to type in, I am angry, you know, it just goes, wow, you're pretty pissed off. Let's bring you down a notch, you know. And so,
with your Nike,
you know, maybe in the scariest sense, I gave you really what I thought were big brother scary things about how companies are already using it in public spaces like, you know, restaurants and retail spaces. Believe me, it is not just some kid behind the counter deciding what they want to play and, you know, the Topshop or H&M. They're very clever about what they're choosing. But you could even think of the scary stuff that they do for the military when they send them over to Afghanistan and Iraq and feed them the death metal and heavy, you know, because they know that gets them really fired up. So it's not a wish list, but I can tell you these things have already started to merge, and we've recognized it, but now with technology, it's really going to happen. And so maybe my wish list is we at least need to be aware of what's happening. That, you know, just now if you do a Google search, if we all do one for the same thing, we'll get different search results based on who we are, because it'll know what I've searched for in the past, what I like, what I don't like. And so now we're going to get music playlists and things that aren't just based on my personal taste of music, but also what's actually happening in my brain. Not just the location stuff, but literally my physiology.
My wish list is probably a little closer to what Olivier and Michela said about interface. I feel like most of the music interfaces we have today, be it Spotify or iTunes or Winamp or any of those services, are largely based on what essentially looks like a spreadsheet to me. Which
it's absolutely a spreadsheet.
And it's ugly. I mean, there's just no question. Why is something as cool as music and we're exploring it like we would do an Excel, like a financial report, right?
It's
we're limited totally by that right now. So I'm much more interested. We're actually doing some stuff with Arduino, the open source platform now. We're writing some last FM libraries so some kids in Stockholm can build tangible interfaces. It's a tangible music class. And we're hoping that those Arduino libraries will help people make things that physically, people interact music physically. To your point earlier, if Robert's pogoing up and down at a concert like that, we can have the music react to that. So I'm excited to see those kind of changes come, and I think we're on the cusp of those. And I'm excited about tangible interfaces and visual interfaces to music rather than, as you pointed out, Scott pointed out, typing so 2003. I don't want to type anymore. I want to swipe things. I want to have it connected. So I'm expecting the interfaces to be not about typing, maybe about speech, maybe about motion.
All right, then we can lock the door so that they have to answer your questions. Has anybody got anything that they'd like to ask?
Hey, it's Andrew from Moscow, Russia. Zvuk's online music service, which is kind of trying to tackle the problem starting with emerging markets. So where most of us are talking about new kind of interfaces and trying to solve the long tail problem to get a good way to dive into the global catalog without any boundaries of marketing or geography. The question is, we're all thinking, we're all forced to think in historically in terms of mass production, short tail, and in terms of tracks, well-known tracks, less known tracks, well-known songs, well-known pieces of art, and kind of having art in pieces is kind of very much tied with marketing and mass production. So we're now speaking about all these new approaches to music. And if we analyze the direction that we're trying to take this whole industry in some ways it's about moving from broadcast to unicast, from mass production to personal interaction. And then what if we kind of try to see beyond what we're doing at the moment, what we're trying to achieve, beyond that in the same direction, aren't we facing the obsolescence of such fundamental items as tracks and songs, and going into a lot more live music, a lot more personally produced and personally streamed music? Is anyone working on technology that departs from tracks and all the other items that are mostly the result of mass production and this?
Totally. Absolutely. So if I can jump into this, because it's exactly what we've been thinking. So obviously we're still sticking to Motown 4-minute vinyl, which is hysterical, actually, when you think about it. And, that was, of its own time, it was a result of a particular technology, of a particular format, of particular gaps in radio transmissions that had to be filled. We're still using the old systems to generate music, the old formats to market music. It's actually astonishing when you stop and think about it. Case in point being that, for instance, when the end of Sgt. Pepper's as a piece of vinyl was designed to loop and never end. Now, when translated to digital, it couldn't be done because, of course, it would go on forever. So they had to cut it. So they changed the concept of the record, of a classic record. Of course, we know that we could do it. We could do it as an app. And you could leave it to loop forever as an app because you'd have control over stopping it. And that gives you a clue to where we're going. So that is, if you want to do concept music, actually the interesting direction is start turning music into apps. Yeah. So that is one major thing. The other thing is the format, the length, which can now be very often, I'll challenge the audience here, a lot of the sounds they know come in 30-second chunks that have been used in advertising. Now, for better or for worse, of course. However, there is a lot of that going on, and there's also the question of, how the hell do you find a piece of Philip Glass music or Dark Side of the Moon in a traditional sort of sense when you're describing a track. So the technology that we're working on is something that dives into music at a granular level to the point that it looks at musical phrases and not at tracks. And by defining a musical phrase, by using uses all algorithms and machine learning, all the stuff that we discussed before. However, it's actually the approach is different, and the approach is to musical phrases as the core component of a musical piece, whether that be the Dark Side of the Moon or a 30-second piece of production music. That, of course, allows music makers to start sort of experimenting with any length of music. And of course, the addition of apps to this allows to play with multi-channel. So I was working on a project with a French company called MusicTech, which was an MXP4 platform, which generated music on the fly from a series of channels that composers had written. But every time it composed the channels in a different way, it put the channels together in a different way. So this piece of music always had iterations that were slightly surprising. So this is considering a piece of music as an app again. So those two things, not limiting the length, because we're not looking at as much as I absolutely love vinyl, by the way. I mean, we all do. I'm sure we all still have a kind of passion about that format. Leaving that aside, allowing the piece of music to extend to any length that is appropriate for the creator, and adding the ability of music be turned into an application, and where the user can interact with it in different ways. All of a sudden, you'll find that users are prepared. People will be prepared to pay for music when it's presented to them in that format. That's my hunch.
I'd say some things that you guys are doing, as well as what Olivier is doing with WebDoc and what the SoundCloud guys are doing, are really, I think, freeing up the expectation we have to put it through a record industry. again, right? I mean, if we actually scrabble everything. We have stuff. We have short stories scrabble. We have 60-minute things. We have all kinds of them. We let it come in, and it tends to be in a lot of different places. A full fifth of what we put on our radio stations are from unsigned artists and bands. We deliberately draw from this pool of people who've uploaded music directly to us rather than going through a record label. So I think that discovery of those people is actually really important to this. And so actually being able to surface new forms, I don't think we're there yet, because you're right, all the marketing machine is behind that. But I do think as the creators start to make more things, like make more web docs, make more long form, make more apps, we have to find ways to make that discovery happen there too.
Yeah, maybe it's funny because you started by saying, this solving the problem of the long tail. And it's interesting because if you think of it, of what a lot of the people on this panel are doing, and we're solving problems, but I don't know that consumers would say they have any problem, that they don't have a problem. I don't know if anyone in here has read the Blue Ocean book. It was from some articles in the Harvard Business Journal, and it's this idea of creating demand where none existed before. Like, consumers don't even know that they want this stuff. We're solving problems that they don't even know they have. They'll only know they have it when all this stuff is kind of sorted and go, how did I ever live in the other world before this existed? So if anything, what we're working on is the biggest challenge of all, because people don't know they need it until it's finally delivered. And that, I don't know if that answers your question, but it was just really that first bit of how we solve a problem, because we're solving a problem that doesn't exist to the world. It exists to us in this room.
I think one of the ways that I view the world is being approaching music and music collections from a different perspective is we were given some interesting tools to work with. And I think the example of the Paul McCartney, and then you get brought down the river of Brazilian music, I think there's a value that people have not really realized in the proper seed song or the proper seed query that will actually send you off on a journey. Because right now, people are not actually exchanging these types of informations, but every once in a while when I'm playing in Google Music and I hit upon that one seed track that just makes this absolutely awesome playlist, I just want to go figure out, this is awesome, right? So everyone, this is a great track to play with as a seed to make a playlist. And then whenever I find these types of seeds, I kind of want to share them. Right, so there's seeds and queries that can send you on a journey that I think we ought to start thinking about exchanging and interchanging and highlighting. I'd like to see that happen.
Hi. In fact, I don't know if you will know the answer of my question, but it's something that sometimes is a lot of my mind. Why? If there is so much amount of data that there are computers and algorithms that know almost everything about the user, me. You commented that if we search something on Google, then we will receive different results. So why, when I log into Spotify, for instance, the records that are recommended to me have nothing to do with me and what I listen to? What I feel is that if everything is so intelligent and there is so much information and tagging and everything, why I feel that when I receive publicity, the only tags that they have taken into account is the fact that I'm Spanish. So they recommend me Spanish music, the lamest Spanish music. Then the other thing that they may have taken into account is that I'm a woman. So I receive publicity of things that might appeal to a woman and that I'm between this age and this age. And none of this interests me at all. Why?
I have an app for you.
Really?
But I think you're coming across something that's really important in this, which is personalization. We're talking about requires seeds, right? So the hard thing that any recommendation has, and I'm sure the BMAT guys have this, we all have to start with something. We all need a seed to start with. So one of the things a challenge for us is if I've just met you, and I have just met you, so I don't know anything about your musical taste, you just give me a couple of bits of information. You told me where you live. So I'm starting with something that I have. Those are the only things they've got right now. So what we've got to do in these tools have got to be better at taking information from you in an ambient way, right? Ways that don't require much. So one of the things we try to do at Last.fm, and I don't want to make it about us, it's about just services in general. We need to take in stuff that you tell us, be it a location that you're in, be it a mood you're in, be it all the things we've been talking about, and then collect it someplace in a way that isn't creepy to you, right? That's the other thing. Have you ever had that feeling when someone's recommended something way too close? You know, there was this famous article in the States recently about a teenage girl who got a pregnancy diaper stuff because she bought a pregnancy kit at Target, and her dad got in the mail. They were saying, "Why are you sending my 16-year-old daughter pregnancy stuff?" And it was because she brought a pregnancy test, right? It just outed her to her parents that she was pregnant, right? So we've got to be really careful about what we take in, and it's always got to be something that you give us. And one of the things we have a very strict policy at Last.fm that we don't own the data. You own your own data, and it's super, super important that we don't sell your data to somebody else, or it's really important that you feel fully in control of that, and that you give data to people. It's not a privacy problem, it's a trust issue. You give data to people you trust. And when you've given someone you trust, we have to return experiences and contextual things to you that matter to you. And if we don't, skip it. Go to somebody else, right? So I would say if you're having a problem on Spotify, we have an app that's really good at that, right? And it's based on what you listen to. But it is, but you can do that from all these ways.
It could be something else. For instance, all the publicity that I receive on Facebook has nothing to do with me. I think that nowadays, especially in music, I don't think that the target that listens to music it's a teenager anymore. It goes beyond and beyond and beyond and deep and beyond. And I feel like there's still, especially in publicity and in journalism, the idea that the music listener, the modern music listener, pop music listener, whatever, is still a teenager, when this is not true anymore.
Absolutely not true. And we know this for a fact, right? I mean, this is why it's so important to use a good seed, that Robert said. I mean, it's super important that we take the information you give us and return it back to you in a way that and allow you to feed back to us if we're getting it wrong or right. While most of the music services have a thumbs up or a thumbs down thing, and if you're not using those, you're not training the machines, right? And you want to train the machines. You want them working for you, not the other way around. We'll get better at it. Sorry. Nope.
I think one of the things that you might also be encountering is that the music industry still feels this desire to push music on everyone. So in some senses, they'd rather not take into account your musical taste because they have a certain artist that they need to push. And they'll do any means to do that, right? So they don't really care what you're listening to. They want to push your stuff. They would like you to be converted to listen to the stuff that they're pushing. Which obviously
they get the contrary effect.
Yeah,
they get that I get really angry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the other side of it is that we just haven't gotten there yet. A lot of people haven't figured out that we really need to be doing this. And Spotify, the Spotify team is here. We could poke them and say, hey, why aren't you guys doing that? So specifically, you should ask them that question. But in a lot of senses, it's just that's more stuff that needs to be done. And each one of these tech companies has a to-do list that's a mile long, and who knows? Maybe in 3 weeks.
But it already all exists, which is the frustration. You're going. You made for instance, a Facebook profile, and you said, "This is my favorite music," and you have other things you've listened to, and so it's all these things that you already have indicated. They just haven't joined it all up.
Facebook is definitely collecting. Since September, they're collecting a lot of that data.
But I mean, Facebook just reminds me. I mean, I got this thing through Facebook. I completely identify with you. That said, are you 42 and female? You might like this pink Samsung phone. And I just thought, I'm going to sign out of Facebook now, and this is it. I mean, actually, really made me rethink what am I doing on this?
But it's interesting that.
Sorry, it's just I was just going to add that The thing that I completely agree with the other people here. And, there is a question of interfacing as well, because what systems are constantly asking you to do is to describe. And do you want to be searching for music by thinking, or do you want to be searching by listening? And so my suggestion would be that seed queries are something that you want to hear, and the thing that you're interfacing with has to allow you to hear something so that you can react to it without having to try and figure out how on earth you're going to communicate to this system what it is that you really like. It's going to be far, far more immediate and far more appropriate to what you're trying to get from the system. So there is a question of interfacing, and interfacing was still in spreadsheet form for most part, which is where the problem lies. Sorry.
The other thing that is interesting is like the way you do advertising now. The technology is incredible. You can go, like technically I could put an ad on your page, but you need to think about this. But the guys with budget of advertising are still thinking in the radio way, which was like, we're gonna do a very noisy ad, and we don't care because there is 2 million people listening to that. So that drives you to have like for 2 weeks the same ad on your Facebook page. You never clicked on this, but they're still paying for it. They still try it. If you start to have a message that is like much more like actually a little bit disturbing, which was like there was like so many bands that you know Adele, for instance. If you have someone like, hey, you tired about Adele, and the day after they change the advert and it will be really, and the day after this is a free track for you, then you might do that. But the guys working behind this are thinking on a psycho level and not a macro level. And I think this is a big issue in advertising, is that people still think like, okay, so in France, if I do an advertising, like, okay, I want to reach 6 million people, so I'm going to do it like with everyone liking, I don't know, like a big brand. Doesn't drive you anything very like interesting for the brand and for the consumers.
Hi everybody. I was very impressed by the last part of the speech when you started talking about the connection between emotions and all of this stuff, geotagging. Because, okay, I present myself, I'm Massimiliano Grassi from Italy, and I have a kind of double job life because I'm here as a musical journalist, but my primary job is I'm an affective neuroscientist. So I work as a researcher in the field of psychology and neuroscience of emotions. And I think what you said is really the point, because for a lot of time we started to match music, to tag music with, I don't know, genres, or you said also location-based systems. But you know what? Music is primarily emotions. And you really feel it when you go to listen to some different DJs. For example, I really like Laurent Garnier. I think is the best DJ in the world because he does not follow genres. He create emotions. He can match a samba song. It happened two months ago. A samba song and an old 80s electro song, and it was emotionally perfect. They are two different genres, but I think that's the point that for a lot of time we didn't understand. I listen to dubstep, I listen to metal, but who cares? Because in dubsteps and in metal, in classic music, there are maybe songs who can match emotionally. So what you said, I want to have a playlist that I say, okay, I'm very hungry, I want to be quiet. I think it can be done somehow, but we have to change the way we approach in categorizing music. So it's a really, I think it's the future. Is the really future of what we can do with playlists and tagging.
See, bravo.
We all agree.
See, you should have been sitting up here.
Bravissimo, sì.
Oh, wait. No, we got. These are very comfortable, honestly. We could sit here for a while.
Thank you. Sorry to keep you. We talk a lot about sharing music, sharing musical experiences, that kind of thing. But an awful lot of the music services that are available are about sharing metadata, because you can't share music. If I've got a song, I can't say, you listen to this, because what my friend gets is a little pop-up thing which says, this song is not available in your country. I don't know, is there anything technology can do to fix this? The music industry has got a lot more liberal about this sort of thing in the last 10 years. Is it just a question of sitting and waiting? Or is there anything we can do to make it better?
BitTorrent. Everything's available.
Excuse me while I make a note of that.
There's no territorial restrictions.
It is one of the biggest problems, again, back to the whole issue. It's an economic and an infrastructure problem more than anything else. And I would bet you that if you wanted to choose one service that you can share most, and it's the world's biggest music service, is YouTube. So YouTube, if you want to share a link, you share a YouTube link, pretty much. We've tried a couple of different things in this front. Last event, we actually try to pull in multiple sources for things now, and we try to have people share a link that has multiple sources on it, because we think it's going to continue to be just as fragmented as it is today. It's not changing.
But just to go back to Alex's wish list, if we had a database with all the music in it, and I'm a Spotify user and you're a Deezer user or something, it's irrelevant, because then all we need to do is share the metadata, because then it'll pull up what's in your territory. That's
in generally, we've seen them try to do, I mean, services have tried to do that. The problem has generally been that the rights are different, right? So one artist, and it's to support the artists in this, right? It's not all the record labels making these decisions.
Correct.
So I like a band who's on Sub Pop in the States, but in the US, in the UK, they're on Bella Union. Both of those guys have very different relationships with all those various services, and they haven't gotten to Brazil yet, or they haven't gotten to some of these places yet. So that's one of the reasons we try to encourage people to use things like SoundCloud, and we try to say to people, look, it's really important for your music to get heard, and once people have sampled a little of it, and people have shared it, then you're going to buy more, and we've got to stop thinking of the record industry, or the music industry, as the record industry, as the recorded music industry. The music industry is a lot bigger than just recorded music. So sharing samples, sharing those other things, we think it makes the whole ecosystem bigger. It may not make my former bosses at Universal and Sony very happy, but they're a lot smaller in this world than they used to be 5 years ago.
And I was not joking about BitTorrent, because the truth of the matter is, if you're not going to make the stuff available, then don't complain to governments to make things illegal for stealing. So there's plenty of legitimate ways that people can listen to music for free. If you haven't made it available, then don't look to somebody else to enforce your rights for you.
So one of my attitudes on this is that I see this as a twofold problem. First, as Matt was pointing out, there's the territorial problem and licensing issues and so forth. And I have some ideas on that, but that's really difficult stuff because it involves lawyers and such. On the other side, we have the technical issues, and the technical issues are somewhat vexing as well, because you've got everyone who's operating one of these services would love for you to just be in their silo. You know, all the iTunes users, you know, Apple would like to keep in their silo, and you can share playlists inside of the silo and so forth, but you know, how many of your friends all, you know, live in the same music ecosystem? It doesn't work for me. My friends don't do that. So really what we need to do is we need to create technologies that actually allow people to share information about music. So this is one of the reasons why I created the XSPF, pronounced SPIF, playlist format a few years ago with some friends. And the idea there is that you can put more metadata into a playlist format, including URLs, which is, you know, sort of the bonehead way of doing it. But I insisted on having things like canonical identifiers, where you could put MusicBrainz identifiers in. And you can now express a playlist sort of in a context-free kind of situation, where the information about what you want to play is contained in the playlist. And now we're starting to see tools developed such as Playdar, which are a class of tools called a content resolver. Because the idea is that you're given this queue, this playlist, and now the job of this content resolver is to actually resolve it to something that you can play. So whether that is a set of references to Last.fm or Spotify, your own personal collection, or make a recommendation for me to purchase this playlist, fill the gaps of the things, because this playlist came from a friend I really love, I trust him, and therefore I'm willing to go put the $5 into it to go fill in the gaps and make sure I have these things available to myself. This is also the reason why the MusicBrainz identifiers in our world are very important, and we're trying to get everyone to use these, right? Because that allows this non-ambiguous communication about music. If I'm talking about the Breathe track from Pink Floyd, it doesn't really say if we're talking about the vinyl version or the CD version, which is slightly different, or the 1973 live Wembley Stadium version. These, all these services right now are talking about exchanging metadata, and it's just absolutely horrible. If we can have a proper ID where everybody's speaking the same ID, we can now unambiguously communicate about that particular version of Breathe that you're speaking of. So that's one of my personal missions, to try and get everyone to use MusicBrainz IDs so we can actually stop locking up our users and stop locking up these user experiences and actually broaden the horizons for everyone and make the pool for everyone bigger as well, because that attracts more people to play on a greater level. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.